What's going on? Fight night. We are back here following the card of the year. Some might call it the card of all time. UFC 281. Back here with Bet Juice, KOD, Kev, Dog. How we doing, boys?
Oh man, happy and healthy, Kent. I'm so happy to be here. Man, what an incredible card to be at last weekend. One of the best days of my life, truly. To the fights that we witnessed, to the fighters that we met, it was just an absolute fucking movie.
Yeah, man, truly, one of those nights to remember. I mean, they tied the record for most first round finishes. We get a fifth round stoppage in the main event. Obviously, we got a chance to experience that. The UFC Strike Lounge, and that was absolutely awesome. Shout out to Dapper Labs for that hookup. And man, it was awesome. Obviously, experience the fight with you guys. Long time coming, and man, did it ever deliver? Like you could probably hear it in my voice. I'm still like coming off of that, but awesome event all around.
Yeah, I mean, it couldn't have gotten any better. I think all our expectations were so high for 281 heading into it, and somehow it leveled them up. It just surpassed everything. And like you said, shout out Dapper Labs, shout out UFC Strike, putting on one of the best hospitality, activations, VIP lounges you'll probably ever get a part of. I mean, 3 of us got in there due to us owning a champion moment. I mean, anyone with a champion moment at UFC Strike gets access to those lounges, which is awesome. A lot more utility than other NFTs have. But, just us going in there, it's Francis Ngannou, Kamaru Usman, Alex Volkanovski, Cheeto Vera, everyone who you could think of, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Holly Holm, like the list goes on, Brandon Moreno. It just didn't end. Everywhere you look, like someone else just walked in, and it just didn't stop.
Yeah, I while we were in the lounge, I don't know how many times you told me, Matt, is this real? Is this actually happening? Can you pinch me? I mean, it truly felt out of this world. I mean, like you said, guys, it completely exceeded expectations and more. And the fact that we were able to experience that together, the first day that we were all able to meet was just truly a special day.
Yeah, and obviously, I also want to shout out Chef Eric at the Gramercy Ale House for hosting the night's little happy hour before the event. Again,
that got us nice and tuned up heading into that event.
Oh man, did it ever? Like what a night altogether. Something I'm gonna remember a long time for sure.
Yeah, and so much like action-packed moments to unpack here. I just want to ask you guys if there was one fight or one moment, of the night that really stood out to you, Kev.
Yeah, so it's so hard to pinpoint. I would say the best moment had to have been the double knockdown in the Song Woo Choi Trizano fight. That was just spectacular. When that happened, I mean, the energy of the arena just lit up. If we're talking about fight of the night, had to be the Poirier Chandler. Just an absolute war. And then I would say performance of the night would have to be Ryan Spann. I mean, he looked like minus 1,000 in there as a near a 2-1 dog.
Crazy.
Just came in and just steamrolled Reyes. Probably put Reyes in retirement. I hope he retires because the way his head bounced off the canvas like a basketball was not pretty. But that was impressive. But I would say fight of the night for sure. Michael Chandler versus Dustin Poirier.
Yeah, and for sure, my moment of the night, we kind of missed this one while we were in the UFC Strike Lounge. I had to actually rewatch this after the night, but I don't know how I could go anything other than Renato Moicano. And first of all, his performance, and then that legendary post-fight interview. I'm not kidding. I've watched it like 6 times a day since Saturday. It is just amazing. Like, Moicano wants money. Like, the whole thing, start to finish. Best, like, my favorite post-fight interview probably of all time, next to my balls, was Hot Derek Lewis, who is main eventing this upcoming card on UFC Vegas 65. But Dan, how about you?
I mean, look, how can you overlook like the 5th round stoppage of Izzy Adesanya? I mean, truly like a Leon Edwards Usman moment. Really gave us flashbacks. I mean, Izzy was up 3-1, and Poatan just, I don't know if you saw the video of him coming out in the 5th round saying he's ready to kill. Like, this man is just
unreal.
Absolute boogeyman. But again, I mean, for me, I got to go with the Poirier Chandler fight, specifically that first round and how it ended. I mean, you guys hear my voice. Like, I lost it, at the end of that round. I thought it was over. But, guys, I got a bone to pick with both of you. It's if anyone was watching last week's episode, you guys were both heavy on Chandler. And I mean, I tried to, but I won't say anything. Let's roll the tape.
Your pops told you. Should have listened. Old man always knows.
Amazing. Amazing. I can't believe you met him and you got him to pull that video off for you. And just to be clear, when you say you guys, most of that is directed towards Kev Dog here at the bottom. So you got a custom cameo video from Dustin Poirier, Kev.
There you go. There you go. It definitely humbles you when Dustin Poirier, the one you bet against, is telling you word for word to respect your elders.
Yeah, but we're kind of getting it back and forth.
Unreal.
First, we had Mike Davis come on here and humble us for betting against him, and now you got Dustin calling us out betting against him. Hopefully soon we just get the videos where they're thanking us for betting on them, right? And we all cash them out together. But unreal video. I mean, that fight was insane, the whole start to finish. And I forget who was talking about it. Maybe it was Izzy or someone else afterwards talking about that fight. How it was like the perfect blend of everything. Like you got just pure striking in round 1. Round 2, it was basically wrestling and grappling. And then round 3 was just like a hybrid of it all, eventually leading to that submission. Just unreal fight.
Yeah. You gotta, I mean, again, a guy like Dustin Poirier, he's coming off 2 championship losses via rear naked choke. To go out there, take the damage, almost finishing Chandler in the first, losing the second, coming back in the third, and getting that finish. I mean, subbing Chandler is not easy. Charles Oliveira couldn't do it. You know what I mean? So, obviously for me, I'm a little bit more emotionally invested in Dustin, obviously for reasons you guys know, but it was great to see. And he's a great guy. And again, love that he was able to run that little cameo for us. I was able to hit up his hot sauce the next day. Great, highly recommended. And onward and upward, guys. It was an awesome card all around.
How's the maple flavor, for a Canadian? Is it up to par?
It's actually a little spicier than I thought it'd be, but it's good. If you try the other ones, it's kind of like in the middle of the original and the KO edition. So it's it's a good sauce, and you could tell. Like I was talking with Dustin, like it's something that he helped put together. So he really has his hands in that one.
Yeah. Before we hop into the next subject, I'm really curious to hear your guys' thoughts. Who do you think is next for Poirier? Do you think they give him Beneil Dariush or?
Personally, if I was matchmaking, I'm going with Rafael Fiziev. I think that's the fight to make. That's fireworks all around. It's a pretty safe fight for Dustin, I think, where you only have to worry about striking, and you cross off a pretty big name in the division right now.
Yeah. It's tough. I mean, it's like Dustin, and he had said this yesterday on Ariel Helwani's show, is that this fight with Chandler got him up. After that title loss. You need like a fight to motivate you, and Chandler was that opponent. Admittedly, he said Beneil Dariush doesn't really do it for him. I mean, I don't really know, to be honest. It's tough. You can make the case that maybe he waits out for the winner of the Volkanovski Makhachev fight. I mean, I wouldn't. How can you argue with like Dustin getting another shot? I don't know if fighting someone under him in the rankings is going to motivate him. But, we'll see. I mean, one thing's for sure, anytime this guy shows up, it's fireworks. So whoever it is, I'm sure it's going to be a great fight.
Yeah. And with that type of performance, man, I mean, it's time to talk about like one of the best lightweights of all time. I mean, within the top 5, within the top 7, in my opinion, you just look at like the strength of schedule that Poirier has faced. I don't think that there's any other UFC fighter in the world in history that even touches that. So it's truly remarkable just the way he's able to just go into all these wars, and absorb all this damage, but still find a way and find a win. So it's truly remarkable.
And he said it himself. He completed the violence triangle of finishing Eddie Alvarez, finishing Justin Gaethje, and now putting another feather in his cap, finishing Michael Chandler. That's as impressive as they come in the lightweight division.
No doubt.
Speaking of which, we met Gaethje too. And I heard someone asking him about his thoughts on the Dustin and Chandler fight. I heard him say Dustin. That's another guy that we really don't know what's up with that. Maybe we'll get a rematch, him and Dustin. I wouldn't be opposed to it. It kind of makes sense. I know that they're both kind of middling in that division right now, but unreal night of fights, unreal performance by Dustin. Congrats to Alex Bejeda becoming the middleweight champion. Congrats to Weili Zhang becoming the strawweight champion there. Just unreal night of fights, finish after finish after finish. And as you guys mentioned, UFC Strikes Champion Lounge was just a world of its own. But enough living in the past. Let's move on to this upcoming card here we got on Saturday. The UFC Vegas 65 headlined by Derek Black Beast Lewis taking on Sergey the Polar Bear Spivak. Starting off this main card is Jack Della Maddalena taking on Danny Roberts here. Jack Della Maddalena coming off a first-round knockout. Danny Roberts coming off a decision loss to Francisco Trinaldo here. As it stands, Maddalena is a pretty sizable favorite, minus 550. I think rightfully so. I think you can make the argument he goes up to minus 800. It's a safe play. I don't see anywhere that Danny Roberts could take this fight that it puts Jack Della Maddalena in any sort of danger, honestly. I think that this pretty much being November, 19th, this fight's going to take place. It's kind of doing the public a favor of putting JDM back in the public spotlight for a little bit, let him get a big finish, and then put him on the Perth card and kind of just set him up for that. I don't see, like I said, 10-year age difference here in Maddalena's favor. He's got power. Roberts has been knocked out plenty of times. 5 of his 6 losses for Roberts have come inside the distance. And currently, as it sits, Maddalena inside the distance is minus 200. I know we spoke about that a little bit yesterday. I think that that's the way you play this fight. I don't see, Roberts lasting 15 minutes. I don't see Maddalena putting on a 15-minute pace. Minus 200 is not a horrible price to pay. I think that Maddalena finishes this fight north of 75% of the time that they fight. So at minus 200, you kind of have to like that line.
Yeah, I'm right in the same boat with you there, Matt. A guy in Danny Roberts, he's just such a liability defensively. He's been cracked so many times. 4 of his last 5 losses are inside the distance. And he's a guy that, he's going to want to strike. It's not like we're having to worry about a fighter that is going to wrestle, that has this glorified wrestling base, this glorified way of holding down JDM. I think that there will be a spot down the road to fade JDM, but this is certainly not the spot. Guy JDM, on the horizon, we have this, like you said, Matt, this card in Australia, in Perth. This fight is the definition of a layup, man. They want JDM to have a spectacular performance, probably early to keep him, as fresh as possible for his fight in February in Australia. And mind you, he's 2-0 both inside the distance in the first round. I mean, he's incredibly accurate. What I love about Jack, just watching his film, is the way he's able to just continue to keep that jab active and just builds off of it and, just picks his spots, And like you said, Matt, in a 15-minute fight, I have no doubt that Danny Roberts is going to drop at some point. So love JDM, knockout, probably round 1 or round 2.
Yeah, I mean, not much more to add, guys. I mean, Della Maddalena is, he seems to be like that guy that the UFC is going to get behind and push. Great boxing and underrated jiu-jitsu. If you're watching his Contender Series fight against Angeluso, like, he was in some pretty bad positions and he was able to work out of them. And he's got a gas tank for days. He rips to the body. And Danny Roberts is one of these kind of middle of the pack guys. He's pushing on 35 right now. Coming off a 3-round kickboxing Francisco Trinaldo. I mean, it's one of these. He's one of those guys that you never really know. He can look really good at times, and he absolutely against a tough, gritty Della Maddalena. I don't really see where Danny Roberts' path to victory is. So yeah, I mean, Della Maddalena by finish minus 200. I mean, it's tough to play that straight up, but throwing that in a parlay, I can absolutely see that being the way. And definitely, sprinkle on Maddalena, maybe a round 1, round 2. But he's no doubt the side, and I think you're right. It's a perfect setup fight for the Perth card. I expect him to take very little damage here and have a quick turnaround and fight in front of the hometown crowd.
Yeah, I'm just JDM domination all the way through and through. As we mentioned, minus 200 to play inside the distance, parlay it. I think you can play it straight. I think it's pretty safe. Otherwise, if we have nothing else to add on this one, might as well move on to the next one. We have Andre Fiallo making a reappearance here against Muslim Salikov, both coming off knockout losses. Interesting line here because it's kind of a coin flip, right? I think it's minus 115 one way, minus 105 the other. Depending on what day, you'll get a different guy at a different number. And this fight is going to take place on the feet here. Dan, I'll let you kick this one off.
Yeah, really interesting fight because Salikov, before the his last loss, I mean, this guy, I mean, what can you say bad about him? The only issue with him was that he just hadn't been very active, right? I mean, he was coming off like almost a 1.5-year layoff, got knocked out by Jing Liang, and that was really the first time that I think we've really seen like chinks in his armor. Obviously, the king of kung fu, the striking is going to be there, but he's a very well-rounded guy. And when you first look at this matchup, you think, okay, well, Fiallo's a striker, Salikov's a striker, but I'd probably give the grappling edge to Salikov here. So maybe that's his path. But I actually lean Fiallo here for a couple of reasons. I mean, Fiallo admittedly he spoke openly about the fact that he completely underestimated Jake Matthews in his last fight. He didn't think Matthews was going to strike with him, and he like sparred for the fight. I mean, he had two pretty impressive performances coming into the UFC. Obviously, he took that L from Michel Pereira. That was on short notice, and he pushed Pereira to all 3 rounds, but. Besides that, you got a knockout against Miguel Baeza, which is super impressive. I mean, Baeza, had a bit of a rough patch lately, but he was a super hot prospect at the time of that, giving him that L. And then, Cameron Van Camp, I mean, I don't really think this guy is on his level. But what's really interesting about Fiallo, the way that he fights, is like he tries to stay within range, and he tries to hit you off the break, kind of like car crashing, right? Chill, like kind of how Alex Pereira was fighting Izzy, to be honest, like just staying in your face, staying in range. And, once you throw something, he's coming back with 2-3 punch combos. And I think Salikov is potentially going to be gassing here. I really think that Fiallo is going to be the harder in there. I think he's going to be most dangerous in the first round. And for me, I just, Salikov is pushing 39 right. You got a 10-year age difference. You got the height, you got the reach. It's tough to go to bet against Fiallo here. And like when I look at the odds, I just don't understand how this is like a coin flip. I mean, well, actually, it seems like it's a coin flip, but I'm looking here. It seems like some people have Fiallo as the dog, and if you're getting plus money on Fiallo, like you need to hammer that. Like that is a great matchup for him. And again, not to say that Salikov is completely out of this one, but I just think that the inactivity has done him a disservice. Like this guy had a great run, and I think if he would have just been a little bit more active, we probably could have seen this guy make a serious run in the division. But yeah, give me Fiallo here. I think he can actually get the finish and send Salikov into the shadow round.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, Fiallo is literally the definition of a kill or be killed type of guy, right? I mean, you're talking about a guy, his previous 8 fights, 7 of them went under 7.5 minutes. So like he's either getting finished or he's finding the finish. A guy in Salikov, again, he's, pushing 30, 39 years old, probably not as hungry as the guy in Fiallo, who really took the longer way into the UFC, right? I mean, he's got experience in the Bellator. He got his experience in UFC, PFL. So, he's been seasoned quite a bit, a guy in Fiallo. But, one thing that we have seen from Fiallo is his chin is definitely questionable. And, it's kind of a slippery slope though, right? Because you look at a guy in Salikov, his last KO coming in 2019 when he was 35. Now he's 38. The more initially I couldn't really find a lean on this fight, but the more I think about it, Fiallo has got to be the side, right? I mean, 10 years in age difference. He's got to have the speed advantage, right? I mean, Salikov was never really known for that lightning fast hands. It was more or less just finding that connection on the counter. So, yeah, I mean, unless Fiallo puts himself in danger there, right in the pocket, and Salikov connects, I expect Fiallo to dominate. I mean, and like you said, Dan, as the fight progresses, I mean, you'd like to think that it would favor Fiallo tremendously, just given Salikov's age. And mind you, both guys have been knocked out 5 months ago, so just one of those things to be kind of cautious of. I definitely do lean Fiallo in this spot. Nothing heavy, but I'll probably have a unit on him in this fight.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one, right? Because I don't like Fiallo as a UFC caliber fighter for the most part. I feel like he should be the underdog in most fights. He did go on that nice little run in the beginning of this year. We wound up, timing that fade perfectly with Jake Matthews. I feel like I always bring this fight up. Like it's one of my favorite hits of all time. We had Jake Matthews by knockout, like plus 500 or more on that. We had Jake Matthews inside the distance, like plus 3 something. We had Jake Matthews money line, almost 2-1. And we crushed that fight, just basically getting a good read on Fiallo, kind of being this overhyped guy who was crushing cans and fast finishes. And, he did a good job of getting himself out there, getting more fights to keep that fresh, to keep his name inside the public eye. And, ultimately it wound up costing him that fight against Jake Matthews. A little bit too much activity is kind of bad in this rack. And here he is taking his 5th fight of the year now against Muslim Salikov, the guy that, Dan has said has taken some time off, took over a year off before he lost that fight to the Leech in July. But the way I view this fight is it's definitely a striking battle. Dan mentioned it before. I would give the grappling edge to Salikov if there was one in this matchup. Salikov, for what it's worth, is like a world-renowned striker. I know he's very famous in China. I know in Russia as well, where he's from. He fought an M1 promotion. So he has like a lot of good credentials on his side. And being that he's the more technical striker, I'd say, like Kev said, he's not the faster one. He might have more power. I know, we've spoken about this before. That's one of the last things to go in your age is the power. So even though he didn't get a knockout since 2019, you have to factor in his inactivity. And then obviously he fought the Leech his last fight. I mean, the Leech is a phenomenal talent in the division. I don't think we can overlook the fact that it was Jake Matthews, though, who beat Fialho on the feet. And not even beat him, he outclassed Fialho on the feet. Like, start to finish, he saw everything coming his way. He knew what Fialho was throwing before he was throwing it. He knew exactly how to counter. And I don't see how that game changes at all in this matchup here. I feel like Salikov's a more technical striker than Jake Matthews was. So in terms of that regard, like I kind of have to lean Salikov here at sort of a coin flip odds, just because, like I said, I know that he's a talented striker. I know that he's a world-class striker. Fialho, on the other hand, he had a hot hand. He's got power. He was able to capitalize on lightning in a bottle. And, I think that ran out a little bit here. Like I mentioned, 5th fight of the year, he has to be, at least a little bit burnt out. I know he's 28 years old. He's in the prime of his athletic career, but in some way or the other, 5 fight camps in 1 year. I know a lot of them short notice, though, so not full fight camps, but have to imagine it takes a toll on you. Tough matchup, though, to pick. If I were to bet anything, it'd probably be Salikov by knockout, try to get some extra juice on it. But I don't think I could take Fialho in this matchup.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned a good point. With it being his 5th fight of the year, maybe he could be a little burnt out. Maybe he just comes in just more sound, right? I mean, 2 of those 4 fights ended in the first round. So, I don't look at a guy in Fialho that, say, took a lot of damage in 2022. And it's like kind of slippery slope. Right? Like, do you prefer a guy that's been so active that has had these fights, or a guy that truly hasn't? That may have a little ring rust there. So, at 38 years old, I really do question the hunger in Salikov. It does seem like a round 1 or bust situation.
That's fair.
I'm curious, so Fialho from Portugal, is he the only Portuguese fighter in the UFC that you guys can recall?
Randy Costa's Portuguese, but he's not. I don't think he's actually from Portugal. Like,
he's not in the UFC anymore.
Yeah, he's not in the UFC anymore.
Yeah, so right. He could be. I'm really not sure about that.
Huh.
But it is worth mentioning, though, that I feel like whenever these fighters, they're on like their 5th, 6th fight of the year, that's when the drop off comes. We saw it with Kevin Holland a few years ago. I feel like we saw it with what's his name? Yusuf Zalal is a name that comes to mind when he made his splash in the UFC. He had like 5 fights in the first year, won his first 3. The last 2 he just got embarrassed, and it's been downhill since then. So I feel a similar spot. Like once you start piling in these fights, like it just there is a little bit of a deterioration.
Mm-hmm. No doubt.
But if we got nothing else to add on that one, we'll move on to this next fight. Probably everyone's favorite fight. A little bit upset that we did not get a fight in this heavyweight division on the UFC 281 card. Probably for the better, though, because, as we mentioned, a lot of finishes, a lot of first-round finishes, and what more than a sloppy heavyweight fight to ruin all that? But here we have Chase Sherman taking on Waldo Cortez Acosta. Cortez Acosta just fought, 2-3 weeks ago against Jared Vanderaa to a decision win. Fresh off the Contender Series as well, just a month or 2 back. So this guy, speaking of activity, he's staying active at heavyweight, taking on Chase Sherman, who, is coming into this fight. I believe his last fight was canceled, right?
Yeah, against Parisian. Parisian had like some heart palpitations like the morning of the fight, and had to pull out. So
Chase Sherman making this, I'm not even going to call it a cut, right, because he's heavyweight, but making his second appearance here in probably like 3 weeks, I'd say. Wrong picture for Cortez Acosta up here. That is Rodolfo Vieira. Waldo Cortez Acosta is a guy. He's riding a little bit of light in here. He's on a little bit of a streak. Decision win last time out. Not many would have seen that come. I think we had the over 1.5 in that fight, though, if I remember correctly. Tough fight here. I don't know who to bet. As a value hunter, I have to look at Chase Sherman at plus 180 against this guy and be like, okay, that seems like an auto bet, but at the same time, knowing who Chase Sherman is and knowing my personal record in the heavyweight division, I just should stay off this one.
Yeah, it's it's tough to trust Sherman. I actually had Sherman against Josh Parisian just because I really think Parisian just is
me too, yeah,
not good. He's wild with his striking, sloppy with his grappling. was a guy like Acosta. Admittedly, I had bet Jared Vandera against him. I wasn't sold on him. I thought still a little bit green, unproven, strength of schedule, and he showed up. Great hand speed, good durability. My only concern with this fight is because of how recent Acosta did fight, and he did absorb quite a few leg kicks in that fight. And anyone who's ever fought, I mean, would agree is that when you get kicked in the leg that many times, especially at the heavyweight level, the recovering process is, well, I mean, again, depending on how bad it is, but we're talking about a guy who fought like a couple weeks ago. So we know that Sherman likes to use those leg kicks. He's got a full arsenal on the feet. When we've seen him lose, it's usually when he gets taken down and just can't get back up, and that's not really Acosta's game. Having said that, I do think that there's going to be a significant advantage in the hand speed department. I think like Acosta, is a baseball prospect, and you can tell by the way this guy was throwing that power hand of his, like a rocket. He was landing almost at will against Vandera. And I think everyone's a little surprised that one went the distance. I mean, yes and no, right? Vandera is a pretty durable guy for the most part. Sherman was able to get him out of there, but before that, he hadn't really been finished too many times. I lean Acosta here. I don't know if I can get to the price tag that he's at. I think it's at like minus 200, minus 210. He was around the same size favorite against Vandera, right? And if you remember, like I believe Vandera and Sherman, I mean, when they fought, it's MMA math at its finest, right? So you have Acosta who's pretty much the same size favorite against Sherman as he was against Vandera. Does this fight end up the same way? I mean, I think Acosta can get him out of there. I mean, I really think that he can hit the target before Sherman does. We'll see. I think maybe the leg kicks for Sherman will be after here, but unless he can do something serious, I mean, I really do think Acosta's. This is a nice little layup for him as well. Like, seems like they're feeding him the bottom of the barrel of the heavyweight division and trying to build him up. So, in terms of the side, I'm on Salsa Boy. I don't know if I'll find a lean on this fight to bet. I may sprinkle some Acosta by finish just because Sherman's seems to get finished in almost all his fights. But yeah, it's not a strong lean. I can see someone making a case for Sherman, but it's I personally can't get there.
I find it very interesting that the moment you put Jared Vandera on the blacklist, you're going to take Waldo Acosta here. Almost as if it's like you're trying to get vengeance on that L or something of sorts. But you pretty much took all the words out of my mouth, man. A guy in Waldo Acosta who had absorbed all those leg kicks. 3 weeks ago. It's one of those things where, you take a baseball player / boxer into a mixed martial arts fight, and he simply just doesn't know how to check a leg kick. And I can see a spot where Sherman is literally just eating up that front leg all day long to the point where Acosta just cannot stand. I mean, all those leg kicks that he absorbed 3 weeks ago, you're telling me that they're healed 100%? No way. I mean, like, it was an abundance of them, it wouldn't surprise me if he still has a little bruising from his previous fight. But look, a guy in Sherman, he's nothing of spectacular nature, right? I mean, he's been knocked out, he's been subbed, and we're not talking about being subbed by obviously he's been, subbed by insane, talent, but he has been finished by very low level talent in the UFC. So, it's just one of those things where, he took that short notice versus Romanov. UFC gave him another shot at the UFC, performed versus Vandera, and here he is versus another prospect. So I think that Sherman is going to be hungry in this spot. I'm not betting nothing on this fight. I do lean the Sherman side. But one thing that I will say about Waldo that he surprised me in his last fight is his hand speed. I mean, you just kind of look at the the physique and the nature, and yes, he is a boxer, but at heavyweight, just the way that he was able to throw versus Vandera was pretty impressive. So look, I mean, 8-0, he's coming out of that Dominican Republic side. So, he's got that blood, heart, and spirit. But
my favorite analysis.
But yeah, no, I think that I think that this is definitely going over 1.5. I think unless Waldo clips Sherman just out of the blue, Waldo is tough, but I don't think that his legs are going to be able to stand for 15 minutes after all those leg kicks being absorbed. And look, I mean, Chase Sherman definitely did his homework. I'm almost certain that he watched, Waldo's previous fight and knows his liability. So, man, if he can just keep chipping at that leg, I think we could potentially see like a knockout to the point where, Sherman keeps hitting those leg kicks. Waldo simply just can't get up, and he just like goes down so easily that they just call off the fight. So, going to be an interesting fight, but going to stay off this one, but lean the over 1.5.
I actually, not to go against you, that I think that under 1.5 at plus money, I was looking at it before. That kind of caught my attention because I think you have a scenario here with Chase Sherman, right? He's coming off a knockout win. He's kind of feeling himself a little bit. He's going against a pretty green prospect that he knows fought just 2 weeks ago. I wouldn't be surprised if Chase Sherman comes out here just, guns blazing, forward pressure. And we know Cortez Acosta could knock anyone out. And who gets finished better than Chase Sherman in the heavyweight division? Very few people. So that under I saw was like plus 115. That actually caught my eye. So interested to hear you say you like the over. I have to look into it a little more. But yeah, it's just a low-level heavyweight fight. Like you guys mentioned, those leg kicks could be a big factor. I know Sherman's, for what he is, he's athletic. At that size, he's faster than most in the division. He's got a good base behind him. He's got solid movement. And yeah, someone like Cortez Acosta kind of just very green to be minus 215 in this spot. I know Dan was talking about MMA math a little bit. Sherman knocked out Vandera. Acosta beat him by decision, but Sherman was like a plus 150 underdog versus Vandera, whereas Cortez Acosta was like minus 200 plus. So with all those factors coming into play, it makes sense, why this line is what it is, I guess. I would envision it closer like minus 130-ish. But yeah, just an ugly fight all around.
Yeah.
And
go ahead. No, okay. I was just gonna say, motherfucker.
All right, Dan, go. Dan's going.
I was just gonna say real quick that I just don't. I feel like Vandera is much more durable than Sherman. So I think that if Costa can land some of those shots that he was landing on Vandera on Sherman, I think he'll put him out.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say I apologize for cutting you off, Uncle, but a guy in Sherman, like you just look at like his previous fights, his previous losses. Mind you, he has been knocked out quite a few times, but I look at a guy in Sherman like yeah, he's been finished a ton, but I don't think that he's a guy that like necessarily has a glass chin per se, quote unquote. Like I think that he does have a little bit of toughness in him, and like I know that he knows that he's on the verge of probably being cut in the UFC, even though he's coming off a win. So I don't know, man. I think Waldo definitely showed flash like later in those rounds in his previous fight that he is still able to land somewhat at ease. So again, it'll be an interesting fight. I could even see like a greasy split decision. If either guy's able to put either one out early. So yeah, going to be a sloppy heavyweight here for sure. But certainly redemption for not having a heavyweight fight last weekend.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, this is also Cortez Acosta's 5th fight of the year. And we just talked about that in the last breakdown. And now 2-week rundown. Wow. The guy's Dominican Republic, 31 years old, making a splash. Guy could just want a payday. He could just be coming in here, got a quick offer, just got my win and performance bonus in the last one. He's going to come into this one, just try to collect the pay. You never know. You really never know.
Yeah. Stock up on the cerveza, have a little fiesta. Who knows? Maybe that's why he's coming in here to collect this paycheck. So.
Yeah, but enough there of that fight. Let's move into this co-main here taking place in the light heavyweight division. Kennedy Nzechukwu taking on Iwan Cutelaba. Nzechukwu coming off a dominant performance against Carl Robertson his last time out. Iwan Cutelaba coming off a loss against Ryan Spann, where we all cashed Ryan Spann there at plus 2-1 again against Iwan Cutelaba. I think KP had Ryan Spann by finish in that Cutelaba fight, if I remember correctly, for a very, very juicy number. And so Cutelaba comes into this one. He's actually plus 150 underdog against Kennedy Nzechukwu, which is a little bit surprising considering the level of competition Cutelaba has fought. But I guess if you look at the way it's gone down the past few times, you can't necessarily knock this line here. Kev, are you seeing anything in this one that, you have a spot in, an angle, a lean?
Yeah, a guy in Nzechukwu, like he's one of those guys that has such an incredible frame for this division, but it's also the type of guy that like it's taking time for him to evolve on knowing how to utilize that range. And I think we saw a great job of being able to utilize that range versus Carl Robertson. But when it's all said and done, this is a pretty massive step up in competition. I mean, a guy in Ion Cutelaba has fought some absolute dogs, you know. Obviously, he beat Roundtree. He's fought Glover Teixeira. You know, of course, he fought Magomed Ankalaev, Ryan Spann, Johnny Walker. So, like, he's a guy that shared the octagon with some tremendous guys. And he's also a guy that, you know, has that base of wrestling, right? I mean, he's able to take this to the ground, you know, the Hulk. I mean, that's really just how he fights. He takes guys down and simply just mauls them, you know. He's not necessarily looking for any form of a submission per se, but what he is going to do is just take to the mat and maul him. And a guy in Nzechukwu, you know, I don't know if I'm totally sold on him as a prospect. You know, he's kind of had his ups and downs in the UFC. You know, mind you, he does sport an 81 takedown defense, which is above average in the UFC there. But you know, it's going to be an interesting fight, man. You know, I think that on the feet, I think Nzechukwu has him covered. I think that, you know, he's starting to work things together, and once he kind of gets into that groove, he is able to land. But again, a guy in Cutelaba, he's extremely tough. You know, I don't think Cutelaba is a spring chicken by any means. And yeah, if he takes us to the mat, I think Kennedy will have a tough time getting back up to the mat. So yeah, I don't have a strong lean on this one, but I'll toss this one off to Dan, see if he's got anything for us here.
Yeah, you know, interesting fight. I mean, yeah, we got to remember that, you know, Cutelaba was a favorite against Johnny Walker, and we, you know, to our credit, I mean, we cashed that ticket. We had Walker to win there. I thought that line was way off, and you know, when I've actually been very high on Cutelaba. I actually think he's very, very good. The problem with him is the pacing. Like, he comes out in that first round and is incredibly aggressive. He's just plain and simple. He's a great hammer and a shitty nail, and we've seen this with fighters in the past. And the thing about this fight here is that I think that the path is pretty clear for Cutelaba. Like, you know, you got a guy like Nzechukwu who has that like glitch body type, right? He's tall, has these long ass arms, and anyone who just on paper, like, you know, you're paying for that look. You know, that's why you see him as a favorite as he's sitting today. The problem is that it's like he has this reputation of being this, like, you know, up and coming prospect, and you know, just kind of you know, working his way up. He's older than Cutelaba. He's a couple years older than the guy. So it's like, you know, once you're pushing 30, like, I don't know if you can still like classify yourself as a prospect. It's like, it's kind of like shit or get off the toilet. I find Nzechukwu here, yeah. And it's one of those things where we've seen Nzechukwu have these like mental lapses in fights. We saw that against the Down and Junk fight, where he just seems to have a problem with guys that are really aggressive early. That kind of happened in the Ulberg fight as well. And, you know, to his credit, he was able to weather that early storm and come back. I mean, that was Ulberg's first fight in the UFC. I mean, we saw what he did this past weekend. So I don't put too much stock into that, but I do think that it has his back against the wall here. He's fought the much. He certainly has the skill set to win. I mean, this guy is a master of sport in Moldova and in grappling. I mean, MMA. This guy is very well rounded. It's just the IQ that you kind of ask yourself. Like, this is a guy that faked getting like knocked out against Ankalaev. You know, kind of played possum.
Fight call, yeah.
Like, that was the most insane thing I've ever seen in his life. And then we saw the rematch. Ankalaev just absolutely destroyed him. But Ankalaev is about to fight for the title. You know what I mean? Like, this guy is top in the division. So you find yourself here where I think Cutelaba comes out hyper aggressive, and I think he can overwhelm Nzechukwu here. Truth be told, I really do. I think he can get the takedowns. I think Nzechukwu is one of these guys that when the fight's going well, he fights well. When the fight's going wrong, he kind of crumbles a little bit. And you know, credit to him. You know, impressive victory over Carl Robertson. I had Robertson in that fight. That was just
that's a classic
take altogether.
Classic.
That is a classic.
He's up there with with quite a few. But go on.
Yeah, like Mr. Holmes. I don't want to talk about that one, but you know, it's one of these situations where I just think Cutelaba is going to be the guy in there that's hungrier. I think he's going to be the more aggressive fighter. I think he's more well-rounded, actually. And I actually think he can get Kennedy out of there early if he, has the right game plan, uses his wrestling, and lands vicious ground and pound. I really think that. So I'm going to take Cutelaba here. And again, the fact that he was a favorite against Johnny Walker in his last fight, and then I'm getting him at plus money against a guy like Kennedy, who has he fought, right? It's tough to yes, he has the act, but I just feel like he hasn't really put it all together. So he wins here. I mean, this is a decent win. Cutelaba is like a decently big name, and maybe we see him act like there. I'm gonna have a play on Cutelaba here for sure. I think he has a skill set, the tools to do it. He just has to he has to get out of his own way. That's really how he loses this fight. If he just kind of does some dumb shit, gives up his back, or just tries to get cute in there. I mean, he has the skill set. I think it's just a matter of executing, and it should be his.
Yeah.
I agree with so much of what you just said. There were so many talking points I had in my mind ready to go, and you basically nailed every single one of them. And I think it all starts with Cutelaba's pressure, right? And you touched on this as well, that Kennedy, he can get overwhelmed. And I think that someone like Cutelaba, there's few that can overwhelm better than him in the division, where if he's on his game and he's effectively implementing his game plan, that is, the entire baseline of it is overwhelming you, bringing you into deep waters, and just, controlling you from there. And it's also worth noting that Cutelaba, you also mentioned this, he's a fast starter, very, very strong starter out the gates to a fault. You mentioned it, he gassed himself out. And then on the flip side here, Kennedy is a notoriously slow starter. This guy, he can't get out of his own way early. He kind of needs to be hit and woken up to be brought into the fight. And, it's a situation where it could be a little bit too late until he realizes it's time to flip that switch on, because Cutelaba is going to be ragdolling you. He's going to be on top of you. He's going to be throwing you down. He's going to smother you for the most part. And a lot of people I see kind of peg Kennedy by submission as a decent play in this spot for whatever reason, just because Cutelaba coming off back-to-back submission losses against Johnny Walker, Ryan Spann, and Kennedy kind of flashed that a little bit in his last fight, but they're kind of ignoring the fact that he wasn't able to get the submission on Carl Roberson. I feel like that's being lost in the shuffle. He couldn't submit Carl Roberson, but you think he comes in here and he submits Iwan Cutelaba. And Dan, you also mentioned betting lines as well. I mean, Cutelaba 2-1 favorite over Ryan Spann. Cutelaba plus over 2-1 favorite over Johnny Walker's last time out. Guys that are established in this division, that have big wins in their name, that are dangerous guys. Kennedy on the other side, he's really not. And then if you're looking at Kennedy's betting lines, in his last fight, he opened up minus 110 against Carl Roberson. And now you're telling me he's minus 170 plus against a guy like Iwan Cutelaba, who has a neutralizing way of beating you, where it's just domination on the ground, relentless takedowns. I feel like there's a lot to like on the Cutelaba side here. And I feel like everything else I can say about this matchup, Dan already has said. So, at plus money too on Cutelaba, it's a situation. I honestly, if Cutelaba is the minus 175, I'm betting Cutelaba minus 175. It doesn't even have to be a coin flip for me to find the value here. So plus money, it kind of makes it a no-brainer. And, for what it's worth, Kennedy, yeah, he's a promising prospect because of his physical attributes, right? But outside of that, there's nothing really, to write home about with the guy. Anyone, his frame, his size, his stature, I feel like they'd be steamrolling this division. The fact that he can make 205 at that size, he has a leg up on everyone. He just doesn't necessarily utilize it to the best that he can. So Cutelaba plus money here, I really, really like to play. And, we mentioned Magomed Ankalaev. I feel like the Cutelaba rivalry was the springboard for Ankalaev up into that upper echelon of that division. So kind of goes to show, what the real perception of Iwan Cutelaba is in there.
Yeah, no doubt. And I just want to say something for a record, with the Cutelaba Walker fight, I feel like that line was so egregiously mispriced.
That was horrible.
Obviously, we can say it was plus 150, 170, but we all know that fight clearly did not look anything of that nature. But I think it is worth noting, a guy in Cutelaba, out of his last, 6 or 7 fights, he only has 1 win. So, mind you, they're versus top tier competition, but you're talking about a guy that if he loses to Kennedy and Zechku, it really wouldn't surprise me if he gets cut, right? I mean, how can you keep a guy 1 win in 8 fights? So I think, whoever initiates the grappling is going to win this fight. Would it surprise me if Kennedy initiates it? Absolutely not. I mean, we saw kind of a little wrinkle in his game last time out, But I think that I could see a spot where Kennedy simply just relies on his physical strength, his reach, his everything to win this fight. And a guy in Kutalaba, I think that he may be able to be exposed with that. So 8 inches in reach, 4 inches in height is definitely something to behold. But with it, I think if you're talking about like pure power, pure strength, I do lean the Kennedy side. I really do. I think he does have that African blood. So
what about the Moldovan fighting spirit that Kutalaba possesses, Kev?
Nah,
Moldovan doesn't exist over there.
No, it only exists for Africans and South Americans. So
hey man, Nigerians are on a bit of a tough run these days. You know what I mean? I don't know.
I mean, look, we have if we're gonna touch on Moldova and sabermetrics here, how do you not want to take a Moldovan fighter fighting on the co-main of a Moldovan main event in Sergey Spivak? I mean, how rare is that to have two Moldovan fighters headlining?
I didn't even think about that one.
Yeah,
I mean, especially considering how small of a country it is, they're very proudful people. Like, come on, like you got to like that spot there. But we'll use that as a springboard into the main event here with Derek Lewis taking on Sergey Spivak. Sergey Spivak, a 2-1 favorite over the Black Beast. A lot of people say that Black Beast is over with. The Black Beast is no more. His last fight against Pavlovich left much to be desired. I mean, people called it an early stoppage, but I had Derek Lewis in that fight. There was no way he was getting out of that. He was toast. Sergey was just on another level that night. With that being said, I kind of find it hard to bet against the Black Beast here. I know I just mentioned the Moldova factor there with my sabermetric, but is Sergey gonna ragdoll him? Like, have we seen Lewis really get ragdolled like that and controlled for 15 minutes or finish on the ground? Like, man, I mean, I don't think Spivak is big enough to do it. It's tough. I mean, I think Spivak has shown a lot of improvements lately. I think that he is on a nice trajectory up to the top of the division, but something in me, the Black Beast always gets me, man. He has that one punch knockout power. It's like what we saw in the Pereira fight. He could lose 24 minutes of this fight, but in the 25th minute, all he needs is one shot to neutralize everything. So it's in a 25-minute fight, it's a little tougher because I know Lewis hates these 5-rounders. He's going to want to get out of there early. It's a very, very tough fight to bet. I really do think so. Is there a chance that Spivak looks minus 200? Absolutely. I think there's a chance.
You look 500.
I think there's a chance. If Spivak wins, it's going to be looking as a minus 600 favorite. It's not going to come. Like, there's not going to be an in-between here. And that's kind of where I have an issue betting this because, by the numbers, like I feel like Spivak is a very good play here at under minus 200 because, like I just said, if his path to victory comes true, he's going to look every part of that number. But the Black Beast, man, is just a mainstay in the division. Most knockouts in the heavyweight division. It's kind of tough to go against him, against someone in Spivak that doesn't have great striking. So if you take down stuff, you get up 1 or 2 times, you kind of get back on the feet here. You have 25 minutes to do so. Black Beast knockout is not a horrible play. I just don't know if I'm convicted enough in it to take it.
Yeah, and make no mistake, Derek Lewis not only has the most knockouts in the heavyweight division, but he has the most knockouts in UFC history. So, I mean, clearly when he retires, he's going to go down as one of the heaviest punchers the UFC has ever seen. And do I think that he's fallen off a cliff? Absolutely not. Do I think that this is a step up in competition for Spivak? I do, but this is just one of those fights where, it's so hard to truly find an edge just because Lewis has that nuclear power. I mean, Spivak could be winning this fight for the first 2.5 rounds, and then Lewis just finds a clip, finds a chin late in the third. I mean, it really wouldn't surprise me. So, Lewis is just so incredibly volatile the way he's able to end the fight at any point in time. So, I mean, you really do have some balls hammering a Spivak money line in this spot just because, again, step up in competition. He's never faced this sort of power in his career. And, again, Derek Lewis isn't over the hill yet. I think that he could potentially put Spivak out. And, man, if Nzechukwu gets the job done versus Kutalaba, I think that Derek Lewis could potentially come through and spoil the Moldovan party. So, yeah, it'll be a really interesting fight here, but I do lean Derek Lewis, just a fan in me, but it's a no bet all around. No, I'm not going to bet on this main event here, but I certainly expect an action-packed. I expect Spivak to find a way to take this to the mat. I think Lewis will have some moments, but again, if Spivak can get that takedown going early, it'll be very uninspiring on the Lewis side, and it's probably be the beginning of the end if he's able to land that early takedown.
What you got, Uncle?
Is he frozen?
A little bit. I think he's a little frozen.
Yeah, I think he's.
No, I don't know. I'm hearing you guys. I'm like,
It's that Montreal. That's that Montreal connection. The maple syrup is clogging his antennas.
He's got some of that
I'm here.
diamond hot sauce. You're here and there, but
Can you hear us, Dan?
When I'm looking at this fight, I know that I mentioned that it's
second.
Has Derek Lewis been ragdolled before? Yeah, like once or twice. But look who it's coming against, right? It's kind of tough for me to say, confidently that Spivak is going to do that. And I think we need to kind of factor in, who Derek Lewis is losing to and who Spivak is winning against, right? I mean, Derek Lewis, obviously, last time out, Sergey Pavlovich, who pretty much cemented himself as a top dog in that division in that fight. Like, there's no doubt about it. Pavlovich is going to be favored over about 95% of that division in the fight going forward, which he is. I think he takes on Tai Tuivasa next month, and he's the favorite in that fight. But then you look, Derek Lewis, he lost to Tai Tuivasa in a back-and-forth war there where, he had Tai hurt. We just saw the war Tai Tuivasa put on against Cyril Gane, and then obviously the Cyril Gane loss against Derek Lewis, probably the ugliest one of them all. But then, I have some issues looking at Spivak's strength of schedule and who he's beating. He beat an over-the-hill Augusto Sakai, who just, can't sniff a win for the life of him these days. He beat
Dallas Cowboy. Yeah, Dallas Cowboy. Greg Hardy.
Greg Hardy. He beat Greg Hardy, lost to Tom Aspinall, obviously. Beat Alexei Oleinik, beat Jared Vanderaa, beat Carlos Felipe, lost to Tybura. He beat Tai Tuivasa a few years ago, lost to Walt Harris. So, man, Spivak leaves, just some qualms about his strength of schedule here. I have a tough time betting him. I know Dan's going to come in here with the grappling takes and say Sergey Spivak ragdolls Lewis. He's going to make it look easy. I'm fully anticipating that take from Dan here.
I mean, you're not wrong. It's just one of those things where, first of all, like, Derek Lewis, probably the biggest overachiever in UFC history.
Absolutely. Guy's underdog in like 80% of his fights.
Yeah. I'll never forget how this man got knocked out by a hook kick against Sean Jordan in one of his first UFC fights. And that, to me, like, his body of work, what he's been able to do is actually absolutely fucking impressive. He's just, multiple times pulled the wins from out of his ass. And I just don't really see it here. If I look at Spivak and I look at how he loses, he usually loses to mobile heavyweights with quick hands, right? Tom Aspinall kind of starched him. Walt Harris starched him. And outside that, right, he has a decision loss to Marcin Tybura, who's a crafty veteran who, again, he just cashed a big
one of your favorite fighters.
Oh, absolutely. One of my best bets of the year, like plus 300 against an overhyped Romanov. So Tybura is one of these guys that is super crafty and can win a fight multiple ways. And credit to him, right? That was a bit surprising for me. But, Spivak has really been one of these guys that we've seen him grow over time. We've seen him evolve a little bit, and now it seems like he's really putting it all together. Prime for like a nice little run. I think the big difference, everyone is always kind of referring back to like the Curtis Blades fight and how Derek was able to kind of time that uppercut and get Blades out of there, but I just don't. First of all, we're talking about two different kinds of wrestling, right? You're talking about like a folk style where Curtis Blades is always shooting blast double legs, telegraphing them on top of that. And, the game plan was pretty clear with Lewis, right? Just kind of timed that shot, and he did. And he got him out of there. I cashed a big ticket on Lewis in that fight. I just think the wrestling of Spivak here is a little bit different. He's much more locked onto the hips, a lot of clinching, a lot of body locks, and kind of dragging you down. And Derek Lewis, we've seen him get controlled on the ground for long periods of time in fights. Credit to him. Like, that happened in the Oleinik fight up until he was able to find a little sliver of hope, get on top, land some punches. We've seen that with the Marcin Tybura fight, where Tybura was kind of hanging on for 3 rounds and then, 2 or 2.5 rounds, and then gets clipped at the end. So Lewis doesn't need much to end a fight. And I think Spivak knows that. I just don't. It seems like Lewis has kind of lost the fire a little bit. Not that he ever really had the fire. To be honest, this guy is always saying weird shit. How he's not really motivated, and
he just likes the money. That's it.
Yeah, he's here collecting a paycheck, and that's.
But if he's here for the money, you have to imagine he wants a win bonus. No,
I guess, but I don't think he just has it in him anymore. To be honest, I mean, I always thought, like I said, that he was overhyped. I've cashed tickets on him, but when you have somebody come in there with the right game plan against Derek Lewis, he's actually relatively easy to beat. We saw what Daniel Cormier was able to do to him, right? It was the easiest win of his career, I think.
That's like a marquee matchup for Daniel Cormier, though.
Yeah, but I mean, he was an undersized heavyweight, right? He just kind of timed the takedown at the right time, and as soon as he took his back, it's like Lewis has nothing to offer on the ground outside of like just pure survival and like big man get ups. He just tries to like bench press you off him, and that's not going to work against a guy like Spivak. He's too technically sound on the ground.
Yeah.
I absolutely see this. I mean, it's going one or two ways, right? It's either a Spivak, ground and pound finish, or we're gonna, Lewis is gonna pull something out of his ass. But like, in no way, shape, or form do I think that Spivak isn't worth this price tag here. I think it's absolutely worth it. I mean, we saw what he did to like Tai Tuivasa, and Tai Tuivasa is basically a better version of Derek Lewis. He's more varied strikes.
In
more
2019,
durable.
though.
I mean, listen, Tuivasa has definitely grown since that loss, but I think just the from a style perspective, they're actually quite similar. And like I said, Tuivasa is just a better version of Derek Lewis. I think as long as Spivak can avoid the heavy shots early, once he lands that takedown, I have a hard time believing that Lewis is going to be able to get Spivak off him. He may make it to his feet, but Spivak is going to keep that body lock and just drag him right back down. And I think he finishes Lewis here. I think everyone loves to point to the knockout king and how, again, he's always pulled these wins from out of his ass and always seemed to expect that from him. But you got to remember, that shit is not probable. That stuff those are outliers. And Lewis has just been that guy that has strung a couple of those wins together. So you think it's always going to happen, but realistically speaking, that's not the case. So I like the polar bear here. I like Spivak. I like Spivak to finish, especially in a 5-round fight. I just don't see Lewis having the gas tank to handle the grappling here. So again, there's certainly danger. I mean, you can bet Spivak to win, hedge with a Lewis KO, and probably make some money. But I probably won't even go that far. I mean, I'm really high on Spivak here. I think he can get the finish.
Yeah. And the fact of the matter is, Derek Lewis's style, it's so out of date in this division, that heavy power, that heavy punch, and it's kind of like that big country Roy Nelson style, just has that nuclear heat. And
Nelson's a great grappler, though. Roy Nelson's a great.
No, you're right. But it just reminds me, Derek Lewis's style reminds me of the pocket passer in the NFL. It's just kind of a slowly fading away style. And versus a guy in Spivak who has that arsenal to take this fight to the mat, that's got to be his bread and butter. So, but like you said, you make a good point. I think that Derek Lewis, he doesn't really fight for legacy. I think it's really to make a living. And even though it'd be great to get that knockout bonus, I think that, having that urge to want to win and be a champion just gives you that edge in certain fights. And I don't think that we've seen that in Lewis in his previous few, but make no mistake. I mean, most knockouts in UFC history. I mean, you gotta give the man some respect, right? I mean, 13.
It's nothing to discredit. Yeah, it's nothing to discredit. But Dan said something that kind of put this fight into a little bit better perspective for me, where there's two ways that this fight's going to go. Right? It's going to be Sergey Spivak just dominating, from start to finish, whether it be finished by knockout or 25 minutes long. Or it's going to be Sergey Spivak domination up until Derek Lewis ends it, But either way, I think we can all agree that it's more likely than not Sergey Spivak dominates in this fight for an extended period of time. With that being said, it kind of changes my perspective on the price tag here at -200 because he's going to look every bit of it, at least for a part of the fight, right? And as long as that happens for a round or two, you'll be able to hedge off with Derek Lewis live. So Spivak opening up the bell -195 right now, I think that actually might be a decent bet. Now that all things are being considered here, I'm getting to listen to your guys' takes. Definitely in play because it's not it's not a matter of Lewis coming in with a good game plan, effectively poking a jab out, staying out of range of takedowns. Like it comes down to relying on the off button and making the most of a moment. And who knows if Spivak allows him to have that moment.
Yeah,
and it's worth noting to just the audience that we the three of us have not really spoken about this card up until this episode, the filming. So we're like, what are we Thursday morning now? So it's versus what we usually do is we're like usually talking about the card at the beginning of the week, and we already know each other's takes going into this. So I actually like this a little bit better because we get like kind of real reactions out of one another, and it's I think you're right. It's one of those things where with Spivak that he'll look that price tag until something retarded happens. So who knows?
I had the same exact moment of clarity last week with the Molly McCann, Aaron Blanchfield.
Come on,
because seriously, all week long I'm saying like Molly by knockout, like it's a wider line than most, and then Friday night I'm kind of sitting there and I'm thinking, I was like, there's a in this fight, Blanchfield is going to look minus 400 at least 4 times, right? Like it's bound to happen that she's going to cover the number. And, you gave me the final push to go with the Blanchfield sub. And, we cashed that in the lounge. Funny enough, funny story, cashed that ticket while I'm standing next to Coach Joe, who is Alex Volkanovski's head coach. And Volkanovski is to my right, and Coach Joe was walking me through the grappling transitions that Blanchfield. It was a surreal moment listening to someone with that, caliber of knowledge of the sport, who's reached the highest pinnacle. He's the head coach of the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. I'm sitting there. He's telling me about all these transitions, Molly bucking out of the crucifix there and what Blanchfield needs to do to keep her down and end the fight, while I have a $250 ticket on Blanchfield sub plus 350. So it's just a surreal moment there. I'm next to the pound for pound champ. Great time, honestly.
You don't bet against the Renzo Gracie black belt in the Northeast, So yeah, Blanchfield, she is a dog. She's a problem in that division.
Absolutely. But yeah, I think, this raw reaction type thing, it is Thursday morning. You guys have both been traveling for the week, getting back home, getting settled back at home. And so first time we've all heard any of the takes for any of these fights. Kind of refreshing to do. And I guess I'm on Sergey Spivak now.
Let's go. Moldovan parlay, baby.
Moldovan parlay. But yeah, guys, looking forward to this fight card, UFC Vegas 65. It definitely won't reach the same heights as last week, UFC 281, but it definitely could be better from a green perspective. The KP hit a little loss again last week. A little loss. But back on the course this week. We're gonna make some money back. We're gonna fucking go full throttle here, and we're gonna cash out.
You already know we're gonna make it rain, and I fully trust what we've got going, that we'll be back on top. So just trust the process. If you're watching this, trust the process. Don't dwell on the loss, because we're onward and upward from here. So let's just
absolutely. All right, guys, thank you for tuning in. Check us out on Twitter at Fight Night KOD. Join the Discord. You guys know the deal by now, but let's cash in.